Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Greetings, my friends, and welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you'd like to be on the program, as always, you can text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. You can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, so much more. I would be happy to have you. Now. We gotta move on from politics to something else that is right in the wheelhouse for some of you, myself included. I've got some affiliates where this story is going to be all of the audience going to want to pay attention. If you're listening on KMBZ in Kansas City, or you are listening particularly on WOKV in Jacksonville, Florida. By the way, if you're in Jacksonville, I'm going to be there for your Carathon next Friday. I'm torn on this, but I've come down on the side of, man, the taxpayers are getting scammed. So this one in particular, from fieldofschemes.com, which is a website that tracks the development plans for sports stadiums around the country. The Jacksonville Daily Record has a long, dull explainer on the city's upcoming $775 million in subsidies for a Jacksonville Jaguars football stadium renovation. And much thanks to the University of Colorado Denver economist Greg Profiter for reading it closely so we don't have to and finding the detail hidden at the end. You ready for this? Jacksonville, Florida, approved using money for pensions to pay for stadium upgrades. Everbank Stadium will also get the money previously earmarked for the city's other two big sports facilities, and the upkeep will now be paid by residents from the general fund. That's right. Funding plans, this is a little complicated. In 2016, when the city was owing more in pensions to government workers than it had in hand, Duval County voters in Florida overwhelmingly approved extending a 0.5% sales tax surcharge, previously used for road and infrastructure projects, to pay down pension debt. This May, with the city still owing $3.9 billion with a B in pensions, the city council approved siphoning off $600 million in sales tax money to use on the Jaguars stadium. The other $175 million in city stadium money will come from hotel taxes. With the sales tax money now not available to use on pension debts until 2030, the city would need to use general fund taxpayer dollars to make up the difference of $254 million to fund its share of contributions, according to the Daily Record. The pension fund gap is less than the full $600 million in siphoned off money because the sales tax is coming in faster than expected. Now, here's the upshot. Jacksonville, Florida residents voted for a sales tax hike to pay for pension costs, but the city decided to raid the fund to pay for upgrades to a private NFL team stadium, so now it will have to either cut services or raise taxes again to cover its pension debt. That's not how the Jacksonville Jaguars deal was sold at the time, but then we were all distracted by all the pretty pictures of what it would be. They got all sorts of pretty pictures of how this stadium was going to look, and it was going to be this wonderful thing, and then everybody was going to be so excited. And if you live in Jacksonville, Florida, in Duval County, you, my friends, have gotten scammed by your government to pay for this football stadium. And here's the problem. It's happening everywhere. Those of you in Kansas City are familiar with the problems related to Arrowhead Stadium. The voters there killed a deal that would have used a bunch of taxpayer money to fund the private stadium, and now you got Kansas. So I knew this. I think I knew this. I've only been to Kansas City once, and I wasn't technically in Kansas City. I just had to fly in there. Because years ago, I got invited to speak at the Bob Dole Institute at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas. So I flew into Kansas City, Missouri, to the airport there, and promptly drove across into Kansas through Kansas City, Kansas. So it's the Kansas City Chiefs who are in Arrowhead Stadium. There's a Kansas City, Missouri, and right across is a Kansas City, Kansas. And Kansas City, Kansas is thinking they wouldn't mind having the stadium, or Overland Park even is another rumor there, which is also on the Kansas side of the Missouri-Kansas line. Voters don't want to subsidize the private field of dreams of NFL owners. And yet more and more city governments around the country have convinced themselves it's in their economic interest to do this. It's like the Olympics. Paris poured a ton of money into the Olympic Games. They didn't actually get they didn't recoup the money. That's the way this works. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Olympic Games tend to be money losers. One of the only quasi-profitable Olympic Games was the one in Atlanta, Georgia in 1996. And what was the criticism? Too many sponsor billboards, too many advertisers. It was too cluttered. And the Olympics didn't want to do that again. So you pour in this massive amount of money and you think, oh, it's going to be a tourism boon, except it's not. The tourism doesn't pay for the effort. So what these stadiums are claiming is that if done right, they'll bring back the revenue. The problem is it's like betting against the house in casinos. A lot of states want to bring casinos in. Every year in Georgia, where I am, the legislature considers a casino, and essentially at this point it's become a money-making scheme where the casinos drop a bunch of money on the Democrats and Republicans who say they'll consider it, and then they take the money and run it. They don't. Thank God they don't, because casinos, there's a reason Vegas is in a desert. No one's ever been able to replicate Las Vegas. Even Atlantic City is dying. You bring these casinos in and say, well, the revenue is going to boost education. They never wind up boosting education. They just drive up the costs of bankruptcies, drive up crime, drive up addiction, and close local businesses. So where I am, there's a great little theater called the Fox Theater. And the casino legislation that was proposed where I am would have required that like 60% of the revenue come from restaurants and entertainment, not from gambling. So what would have happened is that the casinos would have subsidized and paid a pretty penny to get in music acts and performances, and would have killed a venue like the Fox Theater or some of the amphitheaters in town. Would have absolutely killed them, not in addition to destroying the restaurant industry by putting all these high-end restaurants in the casino to attract people. Would have absolutely devastated the area, and thankfully the legislature rejected it. But the problem is with a lot of these sports stadiums now, they're looking at the Battery. If you're unfamiliar with the Battery is the future of sports stadiums, and the Battery is where the Braves play. Now, the Braves technically play in the teepee. So the stadium that the Braves play in is the teepee. I refuse to call it by its proper name because it's the stupidest name ever. So I call it the TP, which are the initials of the sponsoring bank. So there's Truist Bank. So Truist, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm going off the reservation. I apologize in advance for my little tangential tirade here. So there were two banks. There was Trust Company Bank and there was BB&T, and they merged. And they got the, I'm sure, McKinsey consultants together to come up with the name of their new bank. And you know what they called it? It's the Truist Bank. So it's not quite true. It's not quite trust. It's like truthy, truist, a made-up word that we're supposed to say. And they took Turner Field, and they could have had Hank Aaron Stadium or Bobby Cox Field, but no. Truist Bank, very truthy of them, threw a lot of money at the Braves, and so they call it Truist Park after the bank with the made-up name, and I refuse to call it that, so I call it the Teepee. So the Braves play at the Teepee. And you should all adopt my words and just call it the Teepee. That's where they play. And it's surrounded by hotels and really good restaurants. There's a Mexican restaurant there that I eat at all the time. It's fantastic. Rocky Patel is a cigar manufacturer, and they have a cigar bar there, Patel branded, and it's called Burn, and they have a fantastic cigar selection. One of the best cigar selections. In a great bourbon selection. It's a fantastic venue. What they've done has been great, and it generates a lot of economic impact in that area. Unfortunately, just given the nature of baseball versus football, there are way more hockey games and baseball games than there are football games, because you got 18 weeks in football, and some of them are away and some of them are home, so you're not generating as much. So what the NFL owners do is they essentially engage in this shakedown of counties, and they say, well, we're going to pull our team from your county unless you build us a football stadium, and we get to keep all the revenue. And the economic impact comes in and says, oh, of course, we need to build these stadiums and drive tourist dollars. It's a scam. The NFL stadiums are scams. Y'all know I love football, but it's a scam. And the taxpayers get shaken down. And the latest taxpayers to get shaken down happen to be my listeners. In Kansas City, they rejected it. God bless my listeners in Kansas City for saying, we are not going to pay for your stadium. I'm sure the government's going to find a way to funnel your tax dollars there anyway. But in Jacksonville, Florida, you people are getting screwed by your government. You raised your own taxes to deal with the pension liability that your government created. And now your government has said, yeah, about you generously offering to raise your taxes to pay for pensions, we're going to use it to build a football stadium instead. You have been taken advantage of, and you should be furious. And let's be honest. There's a better argument for the fine folks in Kansas City to do this for their football team because they have the Chiefs. They have a whole lot of Super Bowl wins. They have Mahomes, and they even have Taylor Swift. The Jaguars, God bless you. You don't have Taylor Swift. You don't have Mahomes. But what you have is the pension fund of the city that the taxpayers agreed to jack up their taxes to take care of, that's now subsidizing your stadium build. You're getting scammed. All of you should be furious about getting scammed in Jacksonville for this football stadium. And it's not just you, and it's not just Kansas City. You know, we've run into this problem in Washington, D.C. They've run into this problem in Los Angeles. They've run into this problem now in Oakland, California. They run into the problem in Las Vegas, where you taxpayers are the piggy bank for the NFL owners, who are all billionaires, and they don't need you, and they take advantage of you. I love the game, but I hate the owners. It's remarkable. Every once in a while, you get one of them that does it right, and they're in the minority, I'm afraid. I think Arthur Blank did a pretty good job with Mercedes-Benz, which is a big economic engine in Atlanta. He did a pretty good job, but most of them not so. So I want you people in WOKV listening to me right now to understand that your government is taking advantage of you and your tax dollars to do this stadium. And I want you to learn from my listeners in Kansas City who stood up to their government and said, no, we're not going to do this. We know the Kansas City Chiefs. They're not going to leave us. They love us. We love them. But we're not going to buy a stadium for them. And the rest of you need to be vigilant. Those of you who are in markets with football teams, I got a number of you. You need to be vigilant to these county governments thinking that they're doing a good thing for you by keeping these football teams here. By and large, the football teams, with the exception of the Raiders, they're not going anywhere. They're staying put. So stop letting them take advantage of you. Hello, my fellow Americans. I hope you're having a great day. I got to tell you, there's a moral to a story here that it's basic politics. Now, I know that some of you believe the election was stolen in 2020. Some of you believe the election was not stolen in 2020. Not here to relitigate the election. What I'm here to do is to tell you that you got to pick your audience. You got to know your market. And that in some cases, the MAGA stolen election stuff is starting to wear thin. There were primaries in Wisconsin yesterday. And in a number of those primaries, the hardcore MAGA relitigate the stolen election candidate lost to more moderate Republicans who were exhausted by all of the yelling about the stolen election. Now, you come down to the South, where I am, and in many cases, it's the stolen election guy who wants to relitigate the stolen election and election integrity is going to win, and the guy who says it was stolen is going to lose. And the moral of the story here is you got to find candidates who are fits. And I think that we used to be really good at this, and we had an understanding that you're not going to get a hardcore firebrand conservative elected in a state like Wisconsin necessarily in the same way you might in Georgia. You're not going to get a liberal pro-abortion Republican elected in Texas in the way you might in, say, Massachusetts, where Charlie Baker was the Republican governor but was almost indistinguishable from Democrats, except on official issues. You got to find your candidates to match, but a warning sign moving forward is that in a number of Midwestern states, people are kind of exhausted by full-bore MAGA, re-election, stolen election stuff. This isn't to insult you. This is to tell you that in some places, you just got to learn to fit your constituency. And while in a place like Georgia, for example, a hardcore Trump supporter immediately gets 30% of the vote out of the gate, it's a warning sign in Wisconsin that those people are going down in flames in key primaries. You got to model yourself to your district. That's kind of politics 101. Not everybody can win the same way in the same places, and you just got to recognize that if you want to actually get a majority to advance your agenda, because ultimately you got to have the majority to advance your agenda. All right. Now, I got to tell you about Vision Computers, because if you're a business and you at this economic time need your employees as productive as possible, I bet you don't want to take $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 out of your budget to pay the salary of the in-house IT guy to keep you up and running. That's where Vision comes in. For just $179 per computer per year, not per month, they can be your tech support solution. So your employees get a special phone number, 15 seconds or less. They can call Vision Computer. Vision Computer can diagnose the problem, oftentimes remote in, fix the problem for your employees. Your employees can go back to being productive. So your employees don't have to be computer geniuses. They can be geniuses at your work. Call them at 404-COMPUTE. Tell them I sent you. Get an even better deal, or go to visioncomputers.com. And by the way, this is nationwide. If you're listening to KST in Sacramento, you're listening to WOKV down in Jacksonville, Vision Computers can help any of you nationwide. Visioncomputers.com or 404-COMPUTE. Tell them I sent you. Let them be your tech support solution. Your employees can be productive, and Vision can take care of the computers. I have a tangent. I want to go on because I got an email from someone, and I wrote them back, and then I got another email from someone on the listen. I do the recipe list, and I haven't sent out recipes lately. I promise I'll get back to that. But a couple different people saying, if want a good cookbook? What's a recommendation? If you get on your local reseller of cookbooks, find America's Test Kitchen or Cook's Illustrated Cookbooks. They're great company. Their recipes are almost foolproof. They're good. They have one for cookies. They've just got some great ones. Obviously, the Better Homes and Gardens cookbook is in the joy of cooking, or like staples. Here's a cookbook not to get, with very limited exception. If there's a skinny celebrity on the front of the cookbook, do not buy it. Now, if it's a fat celebrity who cooks, absolutely buy it. You know they like to eat. But the skinny celebrity cookbooks, no, absolutely not. Don't do that. There are very limited exceptions to that. Now, for example, she's not fat. But you read Drummond, Pioneer Woman, I say, not fat. She's on the skinny side, and she's on the face of her cookbooks. That woman loves to cook, and I love her cookbooks, and I want to go see her. I want to go hang out on that ranch. My wife wants to brand cattle. You should buy every Pioneer Woman cookbook you can possibly buy because that woman is legit. Absolutely adore the Pioneer Woman. That one of the few exceptions to skinny celebrities on cookbooks is her. You buy every one of her cookbooks because every recipe is fantastic. One of my favorite recipes is her blackened chicken sandwich with the bacon and the Colby Jack cheese, and you make it in the bacon drip. I'm telling you. But that's it. Avoid the celebrity ones unless it's the Pioneer Woman. Ina Garden, you can buy the Ina Garden ones. But the America's Test Kitchen and the Cook's Illustrated cookbooks, start there. Better Homes and Gardens cookbook and the Joy of Cooking are always great staples. And I avoid all the trendy stuff. I'm not buying vegan cookbooks. Good Lord, no. All right. Now, we have to talk about important stuff. We got to talk about the elections. We got to talk about EVs. And I got to talk to Jose right here talking about Larry Hogan. Jose, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. So you talked about how you need to know your audience. Well, Larry Hogan's been doing a great job. Although I'm what's called a pragmatic MAGA, I don't really care for his trying to go left in Maryland, but it's got to be better it's definitely better. So I'm a pragmatic MAGA. I'll vote for Larry Hogan, even though we don't agree on everything. And I love the fact that Brian Kemp and those guys are doing whatever they can to get him, to help him out. Because that I heard Kamala is coming out here, and the only reason why she's coming out here to Maryland, who's like 70% blue, is because they're worried about Larry Hogan winning the senator race.
Look, that's a great point. So I had Rick Scott on stage with me, who's unquestionably conservative. And he said if he was in Maryland, he would vote for Larry Hogan. That when Larry Hogan gets to the Senate, Larry Hogan's not going to give him everything he wants, but you can't have a majority to push your policy without a Larry Hogan in the Senate. And so, yes, would you rather have the Senate Democrats in charge passing judges or blocking conservative judges, or would you rather have a Larry Hogan who's not going to block a judge? He may not vote for the judge, but he's not going to stop you from putting the judge on the floor. Yeah, Jose, thanks. That's a great point. You got to be that level of practicality. I didn't invite Hogan to the conference because he's definitely very much further left than me, and I didn't want to incite a riot with my crowd. At the same time, yeah, if I were in Maryland, I would absolutely vote for Larry Hogan. Why? Because a Republican Senate majority is better than a Democratic Senate majority. And like Mitch McConnell said, when I asked him about conservative frustrations that I have with him and with the Republicans in the Senate, who oftentimes don't stop stuff I wish they would stop and don't advance stuff I wish they would advance, Mitch McConnell said the measure of the Senate is not what they do, but what they stop. And while they have advanced many things I don't like, they have stopped many, many, many bad things. And I think that's a fair assessment. I don't quite completely agree with him. I think that's somewhat excuse making. But at the same time, yeah, the Senate Republicans in the minority and the majority have stopped a lot of bad Democratic things. And when they're in the majority, they can stop bad judges. They can't stop bad judges in the minority. You want to stop bad Biden judges, you got to have Republicans in the majority. A Larry Hogan in Maryland would give them the majority. So yeah, you got to deal with that. Now, I got to talk about EVs. You guys tend to be passionate about this topic. I'm not here to relitigate Tesla or the Lucid cars or the others. There's a story in Politico, not exactly a conservative publication. The headline, The Dark Side of the EV Revolution, Road Taxes. Pay-per-mile fees have emerged as the most likely solution to dropping gas revenues linked to electric vehicles. For those of you who don't know, the gas tax is how we pay for roads and bridges in this country. There's a federal and a state gas tax. The federal gas tax is on a per capita basis distributed from the feds to the states for roads and bridges. So the feds collect the gas tax and it passes through to the states. It used to not. This is one of the Republican reforms back in the day. The gas tax largely passes through the feds to the states to build the federal highway system in the states, to maintain the interstates and the federal highways, the US ones of the world, stuff like that. Problem is this. As more and more Americans buy electric cars, they're not buying gas. As they're not buying gas, well, the gas tax is on decline. There's a solution. This is from Politico. There's a solution waiting in the wings. Charging drivers for the miles they traverse could easily replace the roughly $80 billion in revenue that state and federal gas taxes produce annually. The problem is getting elected officials to put that plan into action. Gas taxes are among the most politically risky issues elected officials can wade into, and few on the state or the federal level are willing to put their weight behind proposals to charge drivers to use public roads. It is certainly the third rail issue here, says Democratic Senator David Cortez, chair of the California Senate's Transportation Committee. That all tends to rear its ugly head whenever anyone even talks about the gas tax increases or the issue of a potential replacement for it. California is hardly alone. A politically diverse set of states, including Minnesota, Oregon, Utah, New Hampshire, and Virginia, is confronting a loss of revenue thanks to the EV transition. State lawmakers know a fiscal cliff is looming, but the vast majority of them can't muster the political will to deal with it. Transportation experts say it's a problem elected officials need to be thinking about now, even as the electric vehicle transition is still nascent in most states. As more EVs hit the road, the logistics of ditching gas taxes will only become more difficult. The future is approaching more rapidly in California, where Gavin Newsom's goal to end the sale of new gas-powered cars by 2035 is projected to produce a 64% or $5 billion decline in gas taxes over the next decade. EVs make up about 5% of all cars on the road and a quarter of new car sales, and aren't paying their full share of road taxes. California already charges EVs a fee of $118 per year, but it's only enough to make up about a fifth of the amount drivers would have paid at the pump. Now, this is hilarious that it's California Democrats who are scared of raising taxes on people. But here's the thing. Note to Republican legislatures, the people most likely to buy the full EV right now tend not to be your voters anyway. So put them on the mileage tax now. I mean, they're not going to vote for you anyway. Some of them, yes, I know some Republicans who have EVs, but the ones who've gone full EV, they tend to actually lean to the left. So go on and raise taxes on them because the rest of us are subsidizing the roads for them. The problem is the hybrid. I got a buddy of mine. I won't say his name. He'll get flooded with calls. But I got a buddy of mine, and he's got this little new hybrid Prius. He had an F-150. He drives a lot. He's got one of those new Toyota electric hybrids where it's got gas and electric. He can plug it in, and this car hardly uses any gas at all, but it still does use gas. So what do you do with the hybrids that are part gas and part electric? Because you're still paying the gas tax. My guess is you got to add some level of premium on those too. It's a complicated subject. But here's the other problem, y'all. When Chip Roy was on stage at the gathering, he was talking about some of the new mandates. Do you know that the federal government wants new cars to have a kill switch in them? It's not just the breathalyzer where you got to like make sure you're not drunk for your car to stop. They want kill switches on your cars. Think about the auto stop start now for fuel efficiency they've got. It drives me insane. It's blazing hot outside. I'm at a stoplight and my car switches off, and suddenly the air conditioner is kind of running a little warm. I got the auto stop start button that I can push to turn it off, but I got to turn it off every time I get in the car. I can't just automatically turn it off. This is all about control. Because it's only going to be a matter of time before the federal government, because of electric vehicles, use that as a backdoor to put monitoring GPS in your car so they can see everywhere you've gone, to monitor your miles, to assess your tax. Do you really think they're only going to do that to monitor your miles? Really? The green revolution is being treated as a revolution against your privacy by governments. They want to restrict your stoves. Yeah, by the way, You know, they said they weren't going to get rid of the gas stove. They've now trotted out regulations to get rid of the gas stove, or at least to make it so efficient it'll be almost impossible to have one that works worth a damn, because it's not going to be able to produce enough gas to heat your pot of water to boil. They're going to restrict now even like the conventional electric ovens. They're trying to get everybody to get induction ovens, or induction stoves, which, by the way, I've got an induction stove, and I love it. I love my induction cooktop. But if you like gas, you should use – I would have gas, except we don't have gas at our house. And my wife, if I'm honest, she doesn't particularly care for cooking on gas. But the government is trying to control you with how you cook and your fuel sources for cooking. They're trying to control your cars. They're trying to monitor your routes so that they can tax you. They're trying to monitor your drinking and your breath so that you can start your car. They're trying to put in kill switches. This is the federal government and state governments as well. They are trying to use the green revolution as a way to backdoor their anti-privacy surveillance state into your life to control how you live. It's not going to end well for any of us. I honest to goodness, I have no problem. My CFO for my company drives a Tesla. Sure, we make fun of him for giving up his F-150 for a Tesla, but at the same time, he loves his Tesla. Good for him. His whole family loves his Tesla. And you know what? He's not paying for oil changes like me, and he's not paying for gas like me. But of course, you know what? I can drive my Yukon Denali a whole lot further than he can drive his Tesla. Full tank of gas for me and a full charge for him. I can go a lot further. And then it takes me 5 minutes to refill, and he's got to stop and wait at least 30 minutes. I love the freedom of my gas-burning vehicle. Your mileage may vary, no pun intended. The problem here is that the government is using these sorts of green advances to control you. And that is why we got to really think carefully how we advance on this. Yes, I do think Republican states, now's your time to go in and put in the mileage tax for electric vehicles, because most of those people tend to be liberals anyway, and they're not going to vote for you. So might as well go take advantage of it and go on and tax them. It's the hybrid owners, like my buddy up in Rome and his little gas-sipping Prius. How do you treat them? He's Republican. A lot of Republicans are – listen, my next car is probably going to be a hybrid, because it makes a whole lot of sense to me that I can have half battery, half gas, so I can still drive as far as I'm driving right now. I can fill up my car quickly, and I can keep going. That makes sense to me. Toyota was onto something. Remember, the environmentalists tried to have the CEO of Toyota fired for going hybrid instead of full electric. He won. They lost. But in the process, the government continues to snoop, and the green revolution is actually a backdoor government power play to control our lives, and it's increasingly obvious. All right. Let me tell you about Swiss America right now. Speaking of the government. Okay, so I read their series. Somebody asked me, did you really read the report? It takes like 15 minutes to read. And if you get the Secret War on Cash report from Swiss America, it's completely free. It describes the government, how they monitor your spending purchases and like the amount of cash that flows in and out of your bank accounts. Their little tripwires. They can monitor like the dollar bill is a surveillance state in your pocket. All you got to do to get their free report, Secret War on Cash, is to reach out to Swiss America. They're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau, and they can educate you on protecting your assets right now. The Secret War on Cash report takes 15 minutes to read. It can save your retirement and finances. You get your free copy by calling or texting 800-289-2646. And yes, it includes digital forms of currency. You get the report completely free. All you do is mention my name, Eric, when you call or text 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. 2646. You can also go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric, SwissAmerica.com/ERICK, or just text Eric, ERICK, to 800-289-2646. Message and data rates may apply. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. So I have it. I'm like, surely they got a plan here. In the last several months, the Russians have been capturing more and more territory in Ukraine. It's been a slow slog, but they've been advancing. Part of that advance comes from the U.S. being slow to deliver arms to Ukraine and give them the F-16s they promised and more weapon systems. Now they got them. And what Ukraine has done is, instead of trying to push the Russians back militarily, they've invaded Russia. And they have captured a massive pile of Russian territory. Something like 400 square miles of Russian territory, and it's come very easily to them. Russian soldiers have been fleeing, citizens have been fleeing, and it's just a massive amount. Advancing, they've blown up air bases. They've seized more land in Russia in 1 week than Putin has been able to seize in 8 months in Ukraine. And I'm like, this is kind of weird. Why would you do this? Why are you invading? Well, I was like, there's got to be some sort of reason. And all I could think was maybe it was to try to get the Russians to divert. Sure enough, turns out the Russians are now having to leave parts of Ukraine and return home to retake Russian territory. And as they've been pushed out of these parts of Ukraine and the Donbass, the Ukrainians are separately beginning to push forward and take back parts of Ukrainian territory. So I don't know that it's going to work out for them. But that seemed to be their plan, and that plan does seem to be working. What it's also done is it's terrified Russians who are fleeing the area, headed towards Moscow and St. Petersburg, and telling people about the Ukrainians are now fighting back on Russian soil, which is actually a good thing because the Russian press is so tightly controlled by the government, most people don't actually know what's going on down there. So suddenly the Ukrainians are forcing the Russians to have awkward conversations while taking Russian territory and forcing the Russians to flee parts of Ukraine. It actually, right now, the strategy appears to be working. I don't know how long they can keep it up, particularly if the Russians enclose them. They're all going to die. We'll see. But it's been a fascinating maneuver by the Ukrainians to force the Russians' hand, and that has worked.